Hey everybody, welcome to the Dev Talk Show here in December of 2021, December 1st. Can you believe that? December 1st of 2021. That means we're almost done and there's only about 3 or so weeks of shopping left if you are getting Christmas gifts, I suppose. Although that may be done if you started late. You might be in trouble. But here we are with the Dev Talk Show. And we've got to my left and right on the screen, got my co-hosts Rich Ross and Andy Schwam. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I will say that I guess I knew already today that it was December. Like, I remember seeing it earlier in the day, but when you said it, sort of freaked me out a little bit. Like, wow, December. Like, I feel like wow, time's just flying, right? And by the way, you mentioned the holiday gifts and stuff like that. For me, it's Hanukkah.
Yeah.
One of the weird things about Hanukkah is that it's at a different time. And sometimes when it's really early, it's kind of weird because not everybody's in the holiday mode yet. And Hanukkah just shows up and the sales haven't really kicked in the stores, some of that stuff's a little weird, right? But when there's a supply chain shortage, like everybody's talking about now, we buy our gifts early, right? And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, this is working out fine. I'm not having any problems because I haven't hit the holiday rush yet, right? So, anyway, yeah, man, we're here in December. We just had Thanksgiving in the U.S., right? And Dark Elder's on the chat saying Happy Thanksgiving to us, and I had a good holiday. I hope you guys did.
Yeah, it was nice to get away for a while.
You got away? Yeah, Rich?
Well,
cool.
Just away from the office, right? Took a good bit of time away. So that was fun.
Time away. Yeah, it is good. The 4 days does me in. I'm lost on a Monday after a 4-day weekend. I'm looking at my computer and I'm just like, what was I doing? I don't know about you guys. It takes me a little bit to recover off that. I don't know if it's a good thing to say online. The boss will hear that, but oh well.
Well, what
I'm
is
sure they're going through
like
it too
after that, right?
Yeah.
For everybody, what is stand-up like? So what did you do last Wednesday? And everybody says the same thing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know. You're right. Everybody kind of forgets what they're working on. But it's cool. We got the leaves are raked and the turkey has been eaten, and we had a little COVID scare here at my house. I don't know if I told you guys that. One of my kids had at school, I guess, had exposure or whatever you will, and tested positive. Interestingly, no symptoms whatsoever. Maybe a stuffy nose on the first day, nothing, and had to stay home for a bunch of days from school. And we all sort of isolated out, but she felt great the whole time. It was kind of weird, but oh well, we got past that. She already been vaccinated once because she's young, so she just got the first shot. So maybe that's why it didn't affect her. But that was our dealing with COVID. It's certainly not going away. We got this new stream, and I don't know how that's going. I mean, we're technically an international show. Not technically, we have viewers and listeners in other countries and stuff like that. Yeah. And every time I think we're done with it here in the U.S. and we're moving along, it's just not going away, right?
Yeah.
A little frustrating.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and it means that for a lot of things, still not in person, right? Earlier tonight, if you happen to be there, and let us know if you were there. Philly.net had a meeting, and they did we had a .NET 6 post launch wrap-up show, and they had theirs.
I heard the speaker lineup was pretty weak tonight, though.
Yeah, well, not Jeff Fritz. He led it off, and he was great. And then there's sort of a bum, and then after that, Bill Wolf and Rob Kaiser.
Who's the bum? Who bombed out? Who was the bad part?
I talked for about 30 minutes on on some stuff. So
Great,
that
Chris.
should end up.
You're always good, man. You're always good. People love going to your talks and seeing all that. And, you know, oh, look at this on the chat there. Beyond Here Lies Nothing says they were there. Jeff's hat game was on point. What hat was Jeff wearing tonight?
You know what's funny is I don't remember. And the reason I don't remember is because as he was talking, I was listening and I was looking over my notes, ready to take things out that he might have gone through. Because the way that it was broken out was Jeff was going to come in and talk about .NET 6, and honestly, to be honest with you, I think he was free to talk about whatever he wanted. And then what it said for me was Visual Studio 2022 and GitHub, which is an interesting topic choice. So I was taking some notes, and I said, if he covers hot reload, I'll cover something else. But he didn't directly cover it, so I did a hot reload example. So that's basically. That's not the only thing. I mean, I talked a little bit about the Git stuff inside Visual Studio 22, which is a little unusual for me. Although I have been thinking lately about getting back into all the different Git IDEs. That's what I'm calling them, right? Like whether it's GitHub Desktop or Fork or Tower or Source Tree, kind of go through them and sort of, because it's been a long time since I've done that. And people ask me a lot, what do I think about them? And I'm way out of practice in being able to give any real good advice.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, there's always different ways of doing stuff. You know, with Git, there's a lot of tools, a lot of ways to do it. And some of the ways you like. Some, like I say here, Beyond Here Lies Nothing's asking have you tried Git Kraken? And I know the answer to that.
Yeah.
That's like a freebie. That's like a layup, right?
Yeah.
But before that, let me just say, but before we do that, can I point out, Man of Bad Feels says, hello, how are you doing? And that's a first-time chat. I love that Twitch tells us that now. So welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us here. We're hanging out, and we're talking about just dev chat tonight. I think, right? I don't know. You know, we got a couple of ideas for some conversations for tonight, but here's the open question, throwing it out to Chris. Throwing a curveball at him. Have you tried Git Kraken?
Yeah. So Git Kraken is the only Git IDE that I use. I pay for Pro. I've said this to people when I do Git presentations or maybe like Git all-day trainings. Now, I do believe that some of the other ones have caught up, but when I got aboard that train, so to speak, it was because I liked the visualization in Git Kraken. The graph I thought was better than anyone else's. And I also thought that when you went to do something in there, that there's a good one-to-one correlation with what you would do at command line. So other IDEs try to, like, I don't want to say that they hide things, but they put a facade over top. And I really liked that Git Kraken did not necessarily do that. So it's been kind of my daily. I very much like to look at the graph. I'm not a person who can just look at Git log, the traditional Git log anyway, and just be like, oh, yes, I know what's happened here. I like the graph of commits converging and breaking apart, and I feel like that's really useful to me. So, but I will tell you that I'm weird, right? You've all witnessed it. I'll use Git Kraken to look at it, and then I will go back to the terminal and type the command.
Right, right. You don't use the push buttons in Git Kraken, right? You don't use but that's cool though, because I don't think you're alone in like your sort of, I don't want to say unusual or something like that, but you have your way of using Git. Like a lot of people like the command line for Git. You like the visualization of the tooling, and I hadn't seen it until you demoed it on this show quite some time ago. And I'm a fan. Like, I really like it. But yeah, I think it's funny that, like, it's sort of funny to me because I'm a push button guy when it comes to Git. I like to be able to push those buttons, but I'm not surprised at all, you know, that you'll use it for the visual. But, you know, when you're typing the command, there is something to be said for, like, you know it well. You know, because you're executing things. You know, sometimes a button might execute like 3 steps at once, right? It might do like a few things. You know, not always, but it could be like a macro of sorts, right? But when you're doing it, you're gonna, you know, check out, you're gonna switch, you're gonna do whatever you need to do, and, you know, make it all happen. And that's the best way to really understand a tool, honestly, I think.
Yeah, I don't have anything against the different IDEs. I just don't know them all, and I would like to kind of take a look through them again. But one reason why I stay sharp with command line is because, well, first of all, it makes it easier for me when somebody asks me a question. I can be pretty impromptu about showing stuff about Git. The other reason, though, is that if I sit down at another machine, I can still help somebody. I can still maybe do 1 or 2 things without having to worry about having exactly things set up a certain way. So that's just me, though. You know, I admit that I struggle with figuring out how to teach Git to people because I feel like sometimes I just make things worse.
I don't. I have to stop you there. And Rich, back me up here. You, I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your butt here, but we've done a few shows on Git here, and you explain it in a way. You gave me that Post-it note analogy once.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, not every teaching style is going to work for everybody, but come on, man, you know this stuff well, and you explain it well. That's a strong suit of yours. So you know, don't beat yourself up on that one.
Yeah, definitely. I know. I'll tell you when I have a question when it comes out. I've got myself in you know, some serious synchronization issues, and you know, you're able to get me out of it. So, and I definitely know that product pretty well.
Yeah, I have a different outlook on it than a lot of people, which it feels like swimming upstream sometimes. And that can be hard. It can be hard because I'll watch someone else teach, or I'll watch someone else and I'll be like, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to detract from what they're saying, but I think like, man, I really like the sticky note analogy because that's what's really happening. That's what a branch really is. It's just a signpost. It's not like if I have 2 branches, it's not like my rose bush where there really are 2 physical branches. It could be one set of commits that both point almost to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like the word branch so much, although I'm not saying it's bad and that the folks who made Git, especially Linus Torvalds, were wrong. It's just that he had a unique idea to create something that worked for his process of developing open source Linux. And the way we use it is kind of almost what he was going for, but not quite. And I think those little bumps are what really make it hard. Because he has a philosophy. We as a world, we don't quite use it the way he intended, which I'm not saying is bad. But he will. And I've watched him say it. But I think those are where the impedance comes in. Is he thinks of Git as like a web of trust. He thinks of it as that to him, the person who is offering him the commit is more important than the person who actually wrote the code. He has a group of committers that he trusts, and when they say, I want to put this in the Linux kernel, he says, well, that person's good. He doesn't care that that person is vetting someone else who's vetting someone else who's vetting someone else. That person has their own trust. And see, that's not how we use Git, right? We use it with this pull request model of, hey, everybody, here's something I did. And then we try to look at it and examine it then. And maybe our team has a rule of two approvers. Well, not all approvers are created equal. Some of them are kind of like, it kind of looks okay. Other people pull the code down, run the tests, run the product, and then they'll approve it. But, you know, is that, I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just is. It just is what it is.
Right.
So,
well, anyway, so
yeah.
Get, right?
Yeah. I can talk about that all day. So, but we had fun. Philly.net is if you're interested, Philly.net is the local user group that we used to that this show derived from, because we would rush down to the studio after the in-person meetup, and the three of us would hack on the stuff of the day. Maybe we would, whatever we talked about at the meetup, or other stuff. And it was a lot of fun. And then when we couldn't go into the studio anymore, it came here. And so we're glad that you're here with us. But we got a lot of interesting things to talk about, like with December winding down,
Right.
2022 coming very quickly. And I started to think myself over, did I accomplish as a developer what I wanted in 2021? And if I did or I didn't, what would I want to do in 2022? So I don't know. I'm wondering what you all think about that idea.
I'm or I'm going back to the show we did over the summer, and it's like, hey, this is stuff it's halfway through the year. What do we want to make sure we get accomplished? And I'm looking. I go, all right. We just turned the calendar page last month. Time to get it. Time to work on that Maui project I said I was going to work on. So
Yeah, it's easy. I think creative people like ourselves, right, and like a lot of our viewers, right? We have lots of ideas. Sometimes we don't always have all the best ideas. Like I wish I had the $1 million idea. I don't have that, but I have these ideas. There's still ideas that I think would be like fun. And so yeah, like you said, let's build a Maui project. Sounds like a good idea. And then life sort of gets in the way a little bit, or our priorities change and things like that. Work gets things bubble up and things get big, but I know for a fact I did not accomplish some of the things that I had hoped I would do. Some of them that I started doing, but they didn't work out. And so that's so I could talk a little bit about that, and then I would love to talk about where I want to go next year. I like to think about looking forward, as opposed to looking back with my regrets of what I didn't get done. I could talk about what I'm hoping to do, next year, and some of it is the same, and some of it is different. But Bruno says, and Dark Elder, yeah, they're in the same boat, right? Didn't get our side projects done, or whatever. In my case, I'm talking about side projects. I typically am not thinking too much about my real job when I say what things didn't I get done. That's a different story altogether, right? But you know what I didn't? I was really psyched in the beginning of the year. I was doing my personal stream. I got that rolling again, Schwami streams. I was building a project. I had a rhythm going, and that came crashing to a halt when some things at work changed, and I was able to carve out a certain schedule of time for myself that was working out pretty well. And some things changed at work, not necessarily for the bad, but I'm not saying it was a negative thing. But the bottom line is it affected my schedule, and I was like, oh man, I didn't get to keep that show going, and I'd like to do that again, because I really like writing code and live coding, and just talking to people, about code, like just more. It's like, I mean, I think you guys like that as well, right? It's fun, and it's fun to do, and it's something that I didn't do as much as I like. Now, one thing I can say, I'll steal another minute here. One thing I did start to do more of this year, and it kind of comes and goes, but I'm hoping to keep it going in 2022. And this is not really a geek thing, but I started playing more guitar again, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what you guys, I have other hobbies, right? And I find that they when all my hobbies are like firing on multiple cylinder, like if I'm just coding, that's great. But if I'm coding and I'm also playing guitar, and like there's other things going on that are like those kind of hobbies, I feel like it gets me in a good place. Like it clears my head, and it gets me more like, I swear, if I'm playing guitar more often in the week, my coding is probably better for it, like that kind of thing. So I thought I'd throw that out there because I find that there is a correlation there somehow, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Go, engaging that creative part of your brain, however you might do it, right? Kind of opens up um, some of that creative bits that you need to do when you write code. I think there's definitely a relation. I think a lot of people in this line of work have some kind of an artistic outlet or hobby, right? Whether it's music or something art related or something, you know, something that engages that creativity side of that we all tend to have.
Yeah, that's cool. So how about you, Chris? Did you so you didn't get to everything. You brought it
No,
up, right?
no.
Anything in particular we're sharing here? Listen, Chris, you're in a safe place here. You can talk to us. You can open up and tell us about the things. Tell us about the problems. Now, we're not going to go Freudian. We're not going to blame it on your mother or any of that kind of stuff, right? But you can tell us about your problems, Chris. Open up to us.
Well, we did a video in June, um, where I talked a little bit about things I'd like to get done before the end of the year, and I don't remember everything that was in there, but I had a couple of sample projects, and one of them is to help me is like I'm the treasurer of our HOA, and our HOA is not that big, but
Yeah.
I have enough automation. I've built up enough automation over the years to try and help myself, just so that I can keep track of everybody's payments and stuff, so that it's easier to create the little statements, just like a statement you get from, say, the electric company, where it tells you your previous balance, and then, oh, you paid this amount, thank you, and then, oh, here's your new charge, and so here's your new balance. And I started trying to create something more detailed, because I just wanted the people in our neighborhood to have faith that, yes, I got your check, and yes, I cashed it and applied it towards your account.
Mhm.
And because people make honest mistakes, they say, like, I'm pretty sure I paid. So I wanted them to be able to point back at that bill and say, your last payment was check number 1245, and then they'll look and they'll be like, oh, you're right, that is the last one. So I guess I didn't pay third quarter, right? And it's just all about keeping that faith and trust of our neighborhood, because, I mean, who am I? Just somebody volunteering. So I've been using Excel to manage all that, and it's good. It works. It's actually quite amazing what you can do with just with an Excel spreadsheet or two, or a workbook, and maybe a little bit of code, a little
Oh,
bit of
yeah.
macros. But I kind of thought it would be nice if I could get to a place where I could generate, um, each of these statements, and then put them on a website, and maybe even start to say to the membership, if you want to look at your account, you can do it here, to start to head toward a place where some of the membership might even just download a PDF, and then I won't send them anything in the mail anymore. And that would save us some stamps and some aggravation, I suppose. Um,
But you
I
didn't
didn't
get to
start.
it. It's the bummer.
No, no, I didn't start on it, but
We
that was
because
the
we
idea.
talked about. I remember talking about it. It sounded like a really cool project. Like
Yeah,
sounded like something like. And sometimes as developers, and we again we've talked about this kind of stuff on the show. You want to do a side project. You want to learn Blaze or Maui or Entity Framework or whatever it is you want to learn, right? Or a new language. But you're like, what am I going to build? Right? You have the case. You have the use case. You've got something that's feature rich enough to make it interesting, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm not saying that to be mean. Like I'm not picking on. Like you
No,
have this story,
it's a
but like
halfway decent
who's
project.
got the
There's
time
real
to
requirements.
right? But who's got the time to build
Yeah,
it, right? Is what
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's real requirements, which I like. I like that better than a made up sample. There are real problems to solve that I'm not even 100% sure I know how to, and that's where you find out. That's where the rubber meets the road for these new frameworks and technologies and languages and stuff. Is, and I'm not picking on anything, but let's say you've been watching for years now. We've talked about, like, Steve Sanderson and Blazor, and we talked about that from its beginnings, and now here it is, and it's something that the ASP.NET Core team is really proud of. and the rubber meets the road when I try to do something, but I'm not in control of all the requirements. Because if I was, I'd probably make it easy on myself. So that's where I think you really find out if something is going to work for you or work for this thing. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you got choppy there for a second. I don't know if I missed a word there or something like that, but maybe Skype giving us issues. So, but let's turn the tide down and talk about next year, right? Because I think that's what you wanted to talk about, also, right?
Yeah, I wonder, is there such a thing as New Year's resolutions for a developer, right? It doesn't matter if you've been in this industry for a little while or maybe a very long time. I think I think I think a lot of folks who maybe are new because maybe you're a student or maybe you're teaching yourself or you're just here and you're thinking like I'd like to learn programming, but it seems like this dark art and I'm kind of scared to get started. Like in some ways that's the ongoing resolution right there is maybe next year's the year that I will get started with something, you know? So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what you would like to improve on or maybe learn or something. And then we can listen to people in the audience or listen to if people have some questions or just even want to share their own ideas. I think that'd be great too.
Hmm. Yeah, Rich. Looked like you're going to say something. No, you
Yeah,
look like you were going to say something.
That was the brain process thinking, what will I say when we get to me? So
Well, do you want to roll with that, or do you want me to go?
go
You're
for it.
on
My
mute.
brain's still
Something.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I was thinking about this a little bit. So I like to fancy myself as a decent developer, right? I'm okay, but some of the newer C# stuff, the last couple of years, hasn't made its way into my everyday use case things, right? Like I'm just going to throw this out as an example, like a record, right? A new C# record. I was going to call it a record class, but that sounds kind of weird. But a record instead of a class, right? I want to start bringing some of these features into my go-to toolbox, right? Whereas I think if I'm coding something up, I probably just go, public class such and such, right? And I'm starting to write some code with some of those things, and I want to start taking advantage of. There's some really cool stuff in the language. There's even like I use them sometimes like tuples and things like that, which has been around for a little while. But the newer style for writing tuples, I think, is something I don't even know what when that was. But I feel like my coding is pretty good, but it probably for the most part doesn't look all that different than it did a couple of years ago, right? And part of that's because I write less code now than I used to. That's probably is the reason, right? When you don't do it as often, I don't write code every day. It gets hard to bring those things in. But I see the comment there: record classes and record structs. Yeah, thank you. But I do want to start maybe even make a list of some of those things that I want to use and like have that sticky note on the computer so that I see that and I start to embrace some of those newer constructs and techniques into my sort of day-to-day programming. And so that's sort of my first one. With that, I would turn it over to one of you guys, and we can kind of round robin on some of these. I have a few things on here. If Rich isn't ready, I can throw it at Rich again and put him on the spot. Or Chris, you probably have one. Or Rich.
Well, actually, I just have a question. Aside from because that's kind of something we all kind of would run into, right? We've got new features, we've got new things coming through the language. What's the, aside from, are there other thoughts aside from like putting them on a list and saying, oh, when can I use this? Is there something that we do that kind of gets it more ingrained, right? Where it just kind of flows almost from the keyboard because realize that's what that pattern looks like, and that's, I don't know, maybe I'm asking it the wrong way, but I'm just kind of saying how can we streamline that process, right?
Yeah, that's what I want to get to, right? That's the outcome, right? The outcome, the goal of mine isn't to I'll use the record example here. The goal isn't to play with record. The goal is to have record become something that I've sort of burned in. You know, like there's certain things you have burned in the back of your head that you know when you're writing code, that's a part of my toolkit. This is another part of my toolkit. Well, some of these newer things haven't really made their way into my like comfort zone. It's not that I'm necessarily uncomfortable with them. A record is a good example. It's not the most complicated thing in the world, right? Kind of easy to use and they're pretty cool for the right circumstance. But yet, but I don't always think of it, right? So I think you have to force yourself a little bit to use those things in the beginning, and some of that means I need to force myself to do some more programming, quite frankly, to give myself opportunities to do that kind of stuff. When I would program every day and I would go home and read an article or go to a user group or attend a conference and I would like learn some of these things, within weeks I would have those things implemented. I would use these new things, and it's harder for me now, but I want to get good at it. I'm not going to be coding every day. That's just the nature of my job, right? But I am responsible for a lot of people's code. I do code reviews. I do mentoring on coding and all that kind of things. And I want to be able to bring those newer concepts in, right? And I used to be good at that, and I enjoy doing it. So I kind of look forward to it.
Yeah, so you could say that in a way, one of the reasons I want to do a little side project is because I think it's going to be hard to bring a lot of the C# features I'm really interested in and have been as we've went through 8, 9, 10, to bring them into existing code bases. That's a tough problem because some people just may not like them. I mean, gosh, remember var? It's still being fought over. And we're not talking about a new feature here. That's C#3, and that still gets fought over in the workplace. But
that's what I mean. Yeah, I guess there's always that kind of thing, right? But
right.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, but yeah.
Yeah, so like I have a laundry list, and this isn't a resolution of mine, but I have a laundry list of things I want to try out and try to stick to in a project, such as the nullable references. And for me, nullable references,
right?
It's the standpoint of not using null is where I want to go with nullable references, which is funny that I kind of bring that up because I went and looked it up. Some of you may remember the Static Void podcast with Jess Chadwick, myself, and Todd.
Todd Snyder.
Snyder, thank you. Why did I blank on that? And we did a whole show. I can't believe this was 7 years ago. I can't believe it that we talked about null, and I was probably the most passionate of trying to eliminate the thing. Like when we were talking in the particular episode that I would just love to not use it anymore. But I realized, wow, I've been saying that for 6 years now, and I haven't tried to live with something like a nullable references. Using more
a project
like that. Yeah, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
And I do agree with what Beyond Here Lies Nothing is saying, is that simply adopting new language features, which is kind of the other point, is that it's not just for the purpose of just doing it because they're new. It's I want to see if I can get value out of it in a way
that's right.
that I think I should be evangelizing it, right? It's one thing to just talk about.
That's kind of where I'm at with those things. Like I think you need to use them and embrace them for a while, right? And again, I get what Beyond Here Lies Nothing is saying, right? But the only way to find out, so to speak, if those features are worth it is to dive into them a little bit, right? And then you go, you know what, there is value here. This is pretty good. Or you go, this one, it's just it's a syntactic sugar. It doesn't really change my life, right? And do I need to, do we need to start changing our standards at work to embrace some new feature when it's really not necessary? We have to pick and choose our battles, but that's why I want to be in there and be able to, understand and evaluate the value of some of these things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to read what Beyond Here Lies Nothing said because we talked about it. But for those that may be listening audio, he said, I used to jump. Sorry, Beyond Here Lies Nothing said, trying to avoid, we don't know who is responding. I used to jump on the new language features right away and try to incorporate the new stuff. Now I feel that adopting new language features is overemphasized. And I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And sometimes a new feature is a syntactic sugar. Sometimes, especially with what's happening in C#, taking a lot of influence from our friends over in F#, I would say, and even Python a little bit. Although gosh, we could have a whole conversation as to why I'm saying that. And those languages are taking inspiration too. If you go take a look at the Java update list, it reads like C#9 and C#10 in some places. So this inspiration is going around, people are inspired by other people's work, no doubt about it. I think this is an interesting point, though, is sometimes, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a language feature, right? But Dark Elder says, what if the new features include security updates? Sometimes this is just guidance. So I don't specifically have a great security example, except remember, if you're in the .NET BCL, the saga of secure string, going from, hey, here's something you should use for values that you don't want to get read out of a memory dump, to finally a note in the documentation that says, nah, don't use this. It didn't work out. It doesn't do what you think it does, so you're just better off not using it. Like, wow, and that whole journey happened. But how many developers know because they've kept up with that journey of one particular feature, which isn't a language feature per se, but it's important. It's important to know about HTTP client and the birth of HTTP client factory. Like, all that stuff's important to know about. And there's folks out there who might still be using the older web request, and I don't blame them. How do they know that you were given guidance to you shouldn't do that, right? So
yeah, so there are new features that are in there. I guess sort of comparing Dark Elder and Beyond Here Lies Nothing's two comments and two thoughts, and I'm sure neither one of them are looking at this 100% one way or the other. There's always the in between scenarios, but there are. I try to look at these as a lot of these new features are in there because people have requested them, right? There's a reason, and I might have the same problem. I just don't know it, and I'm like, when you get into that, you go, yeah, that would be helpful. And so I like to learn about what's out there and stay on top of it, So and it's fun, honestly. Let's not lose sight of that. So who's next?
Well, I know what I wanted to do this year is I want to really dive in and learn what you would consider a functional programming language. I mean, certainly C# has functional features, and there's actually like some courses out there, including a Pluralsight course, where people are out there using C# in almost a functional manner. It requires some of the newer language updates, but also some NuGet packages. But I don't mean just F# here, although I think that's a place I'd like to go. I think I'd like to also try and build something. I haven't, you can do functional programming with like a Python, but maybe something even more devoted to it, like an Elixir. And the reason is because I'm really inspired by a lot of the concepts. But again, that whole rubber meets the road concept from earlier, I feel like unless I try and actually build something of a little bit more consequence than just playing around and being inspired is a shiny new thing, And I kind of would like to get past that stage and not just think like, oh, well, this is shiny and new and different, so obviously it must be the way forward. Well, that way forward always starts nice and easy, and then you come into the real thorns, and here's what you don't get and things like that. So so we've done a little F sharp on this show, sort of. Like we had our friend Stashu come and show us.
Not sort of. What do you mean sort of? We had our guests. We dedicated a whole show to it. Well, you talk about it a lot. I know you're promoting it a lot. You're always, we've known that you're excited about that, and it's cool. I'd like to. I hope you'll find some time to work on something like that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's interesting because there's the contrast. If you could say like what arm am I not interested in, right? And you guys could throw some thoughts in here. A lot of people say, "Oh, I really want to learn a new programming language. I want to learn Go, or I want to learn some other thing." I don't know. Not so much me. I mean, Python would be a nice companion. Because there's a lot of use cases for Python and machine learning and stuff like that. Where to me, like that's where the use case is different. But I personally don't feel the need. Hello, Good Idea Co. is saying, "What's up, fellas?" Hello. I don't feel the need to, like, if C# can do the thing that I need to do, I don't have this desire to go learn another programming language. I'm not against it. I'm not telling people they shouldn't. Actually, I think it's a good idea to do that. But I don't know. I've gotten to a place where I've sort of like settled in on certain things. I don't need to learn Ruby on Ruby on Rails. I don't need to learn some other kind of web framework. I mean, I dabbled in Angular for a while. I thought that was pretty cool. But we got Blazor now, and I'm just sort of, I don't know. I'm kind of settled in. And again, it's certainly great for other people to learn other languages, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. It's just not a place I'm super interested in. For the show, it'd be cool, right? Don't get me wrong. Like for the show, it'd be fun.
Yeah. So several years ago, like I think a lot of us, when you start using JavaScript, there was a time when I think we all had to. We had no choice. We weren't going to build a front end without knowing a little JavaScript. There was just no way. Yeah. And JavaScript often takes a lot of criticism for idiosyncrasies. And I spent a little time kind of diving in, and I will say that I became inspired by some things in JavaScript that I actually found myself going and looking for in C#. And I'm not talking about language features from 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. I rarely would have written delegates or used like the func and action types to basically say, hey, here is a function that I want as a variable so that I can pass it. I wasn't doing a whole lot of that, not since my C++ days of a pointer to a function. Like I wasn't doing that. I know I was doing it with like, say, event handling, but that was also kind of built into the language that it didn't feel like I was really
different.
Like, it's easy in a way. Like, oh yeah, go call that thing over there when something changes. But I found myself starting
light or something,
Yeah. But because that's such a first class part of JavaScript to be like, hey, on click, run this code. Oh, and here, by the way, just write the function right here.
Yeah.
Have to. You could write the function right there, or you could use the arrow function notation, or you could just say, here's the function name. I actually kind of find myself sort of starting to bring some of that back to C#. And so, and I think a few people have said this in the chat now, that sometimes spending time in other languages, you could take that as a perspective coming back. And I'm not telling you that's the only reason. I certainly am interested in a functional language just because I want to see if I can find that, like, maybe I have more correctness. Maybe there's less ceremony. Yeah. I don't know. And I certainly do think that they would be great topics. Different ways of looking at things is what this show's all about. It doesn't just because we talk about something here that I'm rushing to use it at work the next day, but it might inspire somebody that's watching, right?
Right. So, going back, I want to, call out the Good Idea Co. Maybe if one of you guys wants to pop that comment up on the screen, the one that says on one end, who's running the featured chat? Which one of you guys is doing that? Yeah. Says on one end, you give yourself more opportunity, but on the other, less time to really excel in the place you really have an interest in, right? So at my stage in my career, and I'm in a different place, right? I'm not necessarily looking for more opportunity. That's the thing. Like there was a time when I would have embraced that wholeheartedly, right? And I think it's a really good comment from the Good Idea Co. to say, hey, especially if you're earlier in your career or mid-level and you want to sort of make that shift, learning a new language can really open up like a lot of doors for you, right? And so I think it's really great. I do think, it sort of diverts from, excelling in a particular area. And I've sort of settled in on trying to excel. I wouldn't say that I am mastering that, but trying. But I think the point you guys are making, what beyond here lies nothing says as well. I like the idea of learning a language like on our show and like talking about a language and the way they do things and seeing some of that code to learn to maybe make me look at things differently in C#. Like I can appreciate that, but I don't want to then take that language and then go really like hog wild and start building projects with it. But I do think it's a really good experience to like visually, see a language, talk about it, hear what its strengths are and what it does well, and things like that. I'm with you guys on that. And the Good Idea Cup says, 36, 2 kids, right there with you. I appreciate all these comments. This is great. This is cool. Lot of good chat in the lot of good comments in the chat tonight. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and this is if you're new to the show. Well, welcome to the Dev Talk Show. We're here on Wednesday nights. Sometimes chatting like this. Sort of like an open-ended kind of conversational show. Sometimes we have demos. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we dig into new features, or sometimes we're writing code. It's almost like anything goes here on the show. We do a bunch of different things, and tonight we're kind of hanging out, just talking about some ideas, right?
Yeah. I can't wait to hear what Rich's 2022 developer resolution might be.
He's still spinning his wheels, like, oh, what's it gonna be?
Yeah, I don't. So I'll be honest. There's always, there's a whole list of projects and things that I want to work on. Right, we want to get into. I definitely in the new year want to do some API management sessions here or shows here because we started it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't get to. So that I know that's one thing we want to kind of bring back. But for me,
and Rich, I want you to do a show on that because I want to learn it too. So I'm with you on that. Like I gave you the thumbs up. Anytime you want to do another API management show, I'm in. Okay.
We may kick off the new year with that one, but I think
that'd be great.
Yeah, some of the things that I want to make sure we get done or things I want to start looking into for the new year are things that kind of related to the show. We've talked about some different ideas. Different ways of doing the video here on the show, different ways of interacting with the chat room. I mean, chat is very, it certainly works well, but there are other things that we can use to make this show a little more interactive and a little more inclusive of everybody who's out there. So I think those are the things that for me, I'm looking forward to a little bit over the break and hopefully be able to kick off when we get into the new year. And then playing with a whole bunch of video stuff, just as far as there are different video capabilities that we haven't even played around with yet. We can do shorts on YouTube. How do we do that, right? What does that,
right.
And what does that mean? Is it something of this show? Is it something that is, in addition to this show? And I don't, taking that for what we're doing here in the show, also doing it for some of the stuff that, I can do as part of my day job as well, because there's those tools are still there too. So I think for me, it's less about the code, because it's code is always part of what I've got to do anyway. It's kind of some of the other things that support what we do here and what those other avenues of sharing information, basically. So
yeah, not everything on my list is code as well. I mean, there's so many features, so many things in Azure. There's so many things to work with, libraries, platforms. There's no shortage of things that we might want to do in the new year. But just so happens we've been talking about some code stuff up till now. So we got sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What about what other things do you guys have, Chris, or do you guys want? I can jump in on another one of my my ideas here, something I'm thinking about. By Dark Elder saying, I see a lot of chat going by, but I caught that last one. Azure DevOps demo would be cool. I personally do a lot of stuff with Azure DevOps. I know that Rich is familiar with it. I'm doing I've done a lot of stuff with the build pipelines, release pipelines. Right now, I'm actually looking at some of the new features on the board side of things, which is something that doesn't get as much talk. Because we use it for user stories and work items and all that kind of stuff. And I'm starting to explore some of the new features around feature timelines and Epic and portfolio management kind of stuff that's in there. And so there's some really cool stuff going in there. And I know Rich could probably talk about a bunch of stuff there.
Yeah, I think doing something DevOps lowercase do, versus product name.
Right.
Just because there's so many different, there's Azure DevOps and the board's features and the functions are awesome in there. But more often than not, the conversation, kind of turns a little bit on the GitHub side too, with using that as a place for storing your code, starting to think about actions and all the complexities that are possible, or the complex workflows that you can create. And we did a show a couple weeks ago around the content, using it to automate content because it's just a workflow engine. So yeah, we could certainly, we'll add it to the list. This is, this is what's great about having everybody sound off in the chat on what they want to talk about.
Yeah, that's cool. So this place I want to go in 2022 is learning a new area for me, and this is actually something for work as well. But I hope to bring some of this to the show. Personally, I've got a fair amount of experience, in writing code and writing unit tests, right? And it kind of ties into the the DevOps point. But of course, I run my tests through Azure DevOps, through the pipelines and things like that. And there's other ways to run those as well, right? Some people run them through other tools, but that's what I do. But the place I'm going now, we're embarking on a sort of a new journey in my organization. We certainly put a lot of effort into our QA testing, and we are looking to automate a lot more of our end-to-end type testing, not our unit testing, not our C# methods and things like that, but testing our APIs, testing our web front ends, automated, doing performance testing, doing benchmarking and things like that, and embracing that whole other side of testing. Again, it's stuff that we do a lot of now, but we tend to do it manually, and we want to take it and put and figure out the best practices around that, best tooling around a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's actually pretty interesting. It's testing, but you're writing code to execute. There's some great web testing platforms. Selenium is a pretty popular one, but now Microsoft's involved in Oh, now I'm going to blank out on the name of it. For web testing. Oh God, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm going to have to Google it. Oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm Googling it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. It's eluding me
Where
too.
is it?
So
Playwright is the one I'm looking for. Playwright. I don't know if that's what you were thinking of. There was Coded UI before that, but that
yeah,
was sort of different. Playwright is like a JavaScript automation, but you can do it with C# and all that. I can't speak about it. I don't know much about it, but there's some really cool stuff, and I guess I think Microsoft bought Playwright, or they've bought into it, or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's something Rich knows about, but it sounds pretty cool. And so there's a lot that can be done on the testing, like the post-deployment testing, smoke testing of applications, regression testing, all kinds of stuff that can be done. And some of these are like long-running tests too, especially when you're getting into UI. These aren't things that, you're running them in mere seconds. Some of these are like big, long things. But I'm really into it.
look at that.
And I'm looking forward to learning it. And I'd like to bring some of that back to the show as well. I don't know. Do you guys have any experience with those types of tests? Regression, integration, whatever you want to call it, end-to-end, user type testing, right?
So do you mean, for example, like when you talk about Playwright, um, are you saying basically like, hey, experience with something like a Selenium, or in the past it was Coded UI, where you're actually putting stuff in the UI and making sure it all works?
That's right. That's part of it. That's certainly
Yeah.
part of it. I don't know who's sharing right here. On our side, I can see someone showing the Playwright. And yeah, this is the product I was talking about, right?
You want that up on the screen?
Sure.
We could put it up if we want to talk about it. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say on it.
Yeah.
More the bigger picture topic that, we build web APIs, right? But do you guys have automated testing, not just on the inner code, but like firing off requests to the web API that do load testing, that do performance testing, that all the sort of extra stuff that can be automated is where I want to go with it all. And the same thing for whether it's an API or it's a website or whatever it is we're building.
Yeah. I haven't used Playwright. I in the past tried to do some stuff with Selenium. I have found that front end testing has been like the bane of our existence, and a lot of times a team will try to really invest in it, and it can get really tough, like because you get to a place where maybe a small UI change breaks a bajillion tests. That's a technical term,
Yes,
right? Bajillion.
Mm-hmm.
that's a technical
Um,
term.
and I've even seen some talks where people try to like strategies to try and prevent their automated test suite from just completely becoming stale in a day or an hour or something really awful. So I don't know much about this, but I think it's interesting to look at for sure. That's cool. Um,
Yeah, I think it can be valuable for an organization, right? If you're building a product, you want to make sure that you have really solid testing, that that it's working, not just when you deploy it, but weeks later too. Like, are you using all your features, and did something happen that might have affected some of those features? And you want to know that it breaks before the users find out, and things like that, right? There's like a lot of ways of looking at it. And in particular, things like performance is something that I personally haven't put time into. I mean, I know people in other organizations, in my organization, have put time into it, but do I know that when I deploy my app, it might request for something takes, I don't know, making up a number, half a second, right? Do I know that 6 months later, when the application has been enhanced and the data has grown, do I know that it's still running at half a second? Like anecdotally, I might, or once in a while we might manually run that just to make sure we're on track. But why not run that nightly? Why not, or why not run it, not even nightly, why not run that thing during the day when your users are slamming that service to make sure that we're still meeting our requirements, meeting our demand and things like that. And I think that that's interesting. And there's definitely there's some good tooling for that. And I think I'm kind of excited to dive in. As I've said a couple of times, I'm excited about it.
No, I'm interested in that kind of measurement too, and getting that very early in a project.
Yes.
And it's not like that stuff doesn't exist. It's just that it's one of those things where I think if you don't invest in it early, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. And I love the idea of nightly, like you said, on test environments, but even, let's be honest, most of us are, and I'm not trying to use the cliche as a cliche, a lot of us are testing in production, whether we like it or not. And that's the place where the real metrics count. If our test environment says the thing is lightning fast, but then production metrics, if we have them, show us that it turns out that every time somebody calls that particular API, it's 5 times longer than it is in test. Well, the test isn't helping us. But you got to have the metric to know. It's not about trying to embarrass yourself. It's about having the knowledge.
You got to measure. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe I'll bring some of that to the show if I can figure it out. And hello to Mr. Kawate or Kwawate. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm going with Kwawate. I don't know if I got that right. Hello. Another chat from a first-time viewer, it looks like, or first-time chat. But Dark Elder says, thoughts on Microsoft Edge, super duper secure mode, or changing the way, is that breaking apps or changing the way we code? Well, I would like to think that if it's super secure, it's changing the way we code, but I'm not sure if I'm familiar with super duper secure mode or whatever that might be.
So I think it's a quiet rollout. So here's what's funny, and this shows you what people pay attention to. So I actually heard about Edge Canary getting a clarity boost feature that is going to greatly assist the Xbox cloud gaming with the graphics coming across being even truer to whether if it was being played locally. So guess what I focused on in the Edge announcements over super duper secure loop mode, which I don't know much about other than that some folks whispered about it. And I don't think it was I think it just sort of was released, and I'm actually not 100% sure what it does, except that I guess I think there's a switch that you can enable as a user. Everything I know now, and it was just from a tweet that I remember seeing. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at something. I just popped up an article. Microsoft Super Duper Secure Mode for Edge trades speed for better security. Now, you said it's a slow rollout. Who knows? Maybe they'll get the speed right. But hey, that's a trade-off. And again, I don't know that that's accurate, right? And Rich might be going I'm not saying anything negative about it, but that might be a trade-off I'm willing to make in the interest of security, right? Sure. How much slower is it? I'm sure it's not taking an hour. It's that might be a good trade-off. Honestly, I would like to look into this because. And the article's sort of commenting on its Tesla-esque name because it actually is called Super Duper Secure Mode, which does sound like a Tesla feature, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly a long way away from, something community tech preview beta. It's a little bit of a fan-friendlier name that they're basically trying to say. Common parts of the browser that are exploited, I guess you can either I think what I'm kind of catching up here is it looks like you either can just disable it completely, or that Edge can be quote unquote smart about it and say, you go to, I don't pick something, I'm not trying to pick on them, I know nothing about their web technology, But you go to ESPN.com all the time, and so maybe we'll be a little bit more forgiving there because you go there a lot, so you probably trust them. But the time that a link takes you to place of untrust, we're gonna tighten a little bit of the attack surface, things that people tend to exploit in the browser, I suppose. I don't know that much more about it. But you know what's interesting? I do wonder if you folks want to. You talked about testing, Andy, and I wonder what you would think about taking a quick peek at another type of unit testing, or maybe it deserves like its own show. But I was curious if either you or Rich have heard of property-based testing.
I don't believe I have.
No, same.
And
So-
I don't know if it's yeah.
So
Do you want to share
I'm
your
gonna-
screen?
yeah, I'm
on
going to
this-
bring up
on the-
Visual Studio.
yeah.
And I'm curious if anyone in the audience has seen this. And I'm using C# here, but I should make it clear that property-based testing is actually the first time I heard about it was in the context of F#. So I don't know if Rich has shared my screen over.
Oh,
I'm just going to ask.
I don't think so. Now, I'm just curious. Now, is this something you're looking at for 2022, or have we changed the topic here? Are we not?
No, this is something that I'm looking at. It is something I'm looking at. And the inspiration is trying to, so I want to make it clear that this isn't about being pedantic or making sure that, oh my gosh, only unit tests are unit tests. But I have been thinking a lot more about the difference between a unit test and an acceptance test and so on, because it's not because I think it's important that like you know what every test is, and I'm not a big fan of code coverage metrics. It's not about that. It's that these tests actually solve different problems. So having a good acceptance test suite tells you that the system works end to end, but having a good unit test tells you that this small thing that you built works the way you intended without outside influence, right? So this is like the simplest class in the world. It's just a class with an add method, and all it does is add the two integers together. And so I don't present this as a class that's sitting here waiting for testing, but let's talk about how you might actually test this class. So here I'm using XUnit, and if you're just to take a quick peek at kind of the organization of this, right, is there's the particular math class, and then there's some unit tests where it takes the dependency on the project, and then it can test the project, okay? No big deal. So what would you do to test this? If you really wanted to write a unit test to make sure that you got this correct, you might, using an XUnit or an MS test or whatever, you might start writing tests like this, where you say, well, let me give one of them a shot. 2 and 2 should be 4. So let me make sure that 2 and 2 is 4, and then I'll assume that add is right. But in a lot of these simple things, there are edge cases. And so maybe this isn't the best example because there aren't a whole lot of edge cases in addition. But it's the edge cases that you start thinking of. Like, let's say it's a method where you say, given a string, we will take the first name and last name, capitalize the letters, and everything else will be lowercase. We'll fix that. You start thinking about the edge cases. Well, what if the name is O'Connor with an apostrophe? We got to keep that second C capitalized. So you start writing these tests. So here's a failing test, which obviously I don't care too much about. But am I really going to sit around and start writing like, well, 5 is 2 and 3, and 7 is 0 and 7? So the idea behind a property-based test is to describe the properties of the test and not to say concrete example, concrete example. So there's a library called fscheck that was originally designed for F#, but there are some C# extensions and XUnit extensions. So just by bringing in that library, fscheck and its XUnit extensions, I was able to write this test. Adding two numbers doesn't depend on parameter order. And I will prove that by saying that if you run add xy, the result should be the same if you run add yx. But you're not seeing any concrete numbers here. You might accomplish this today with a data row or some kind of fact where you say, like, here are the 10 things I want you to run through the same code. But what this does instead is by turning this in, and I admit that this little bit is a little confusing. You're like, what do they mean by to property? Well, you're describing the property that you want tested, and then this is the little helper that you don't need in F# land that says, now turn this into a property test and return the result. So what really happens when you run this test? What actually happens, and let's look at Test Explorer, is Test Explorer says, I generated 100 tests that meet that property of taking two integers, running them through X and Y, and then running them through Y and X, and making sure the output was the same. And I'm telling you, they all passed.
Right.
That's the idea of property-based testing. So I wrote another test, and I said, if you add 0 to any number, you should get the number back. You should return its identity. So I just wrote kind of naturally that, well, run add X and 0, you should get X, and make that a test. And that test also passed. It generated 100 of those. And like I said, addition may not be the best thing. I feel like, so I got to be honest, I kind of wrote this while we were chatting before the show. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've really thought through it. But I said, I wonder if this is a little bit of a spin, right? And I wonder if it'd be interesting to look at, or what you think of it.
Well, it's interesting. Now, first of all, the thought of writing a unit test called adding two numbers doesn't depend on parameter order, right? That is something that you could accomplish without like the property-based thing, right? First of all, you should write your method. You should write your tests like that. Like I like the way you're naming your test, but that the test name isn't really what's changing here. What's changing, I assume, is that you're putting a property attribute on there, and you're not specifying the value of X and Y, but the framework is going to then, when you put a property attribute on there, it's going to say, I'm going to run all your property tests and give you some random, X and Y in there. And those are things that you could accomplish slightly differently with other frameworks by providing like lists of values where you would write one test and you would have a list of parameters that would get sucked into it. This appears to do that a little bit more gracefully or a little bit more automagically, right? What I don't understand, and what maybe you didn't quite show it yet, but in this case, you're not returning the what is the to property in the return actually do? Does it aggregate all the? Is that what prevents you from having like 30 answers or 100 answers in the result? Like, does it aggregate the results for you or something?
Yeah, I mean, so fscheck does that. And I admit the to property makes it confusing because in F# you don't need that. But what we're basically saying, and so C# doesn't have the constructs to kind of do this any other way. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's that you get the benefit of using a unit test framework you might already know, XUnit or NUnit, because they have support for both of them, without having to be like, well, let me go use this totally other thing. You can kind of ease your way into this in the C# side. But in a way, another thing that you get out of this, and these aren't the best examples, and I actually feel like I could probably go find some of the inspiration for this. In a way, you sort of get fuzz testing too, because if you forget the corner cases or don't consider them or don't think of them, then they're lost and you'll never catch them, even with something like a data list, right?
Yeah, but how do I know this is covering, like, what's considered an edge case, and how do I know that this is covering an edge case?
So this is too simple, right? Because adding two numbers is really straightforward.
Right.
If I was dividing numbers, I might write more code that says, hey, I want you to test dividing numbers. However, don't test dividing by 0, because we already know that that's not going to work. But what if you forget that test? You just forget that property. So eventually it's going to blow up and say like, hey, an exception got thrown when you divided by 0. In that very simple use case, you just go, oh, gosh, we just need to make that part of the property. But in another case, you might go, oh, wow, that's actually valid input, and we never considered it. So
yeah, I get that. What I'm saying is, how do I know that this did you say it was called FS test?
This is called FS check.
FS check. How do I know that FS check is in its infinite wisdom passing a 0 into my thing? Like, how do I know that it's doing that?
You don't, and you don't need to necessarily, but you don't. I mean, it's generally the idea is to be random tests by specification, which is slightly different from here's the tests I want you to run. And I think better examples are definitely needed. This is pretty simple. It was just that I was able to get this working in like 5 minutes. As something that I've never tried to do before, especially because when I first came across FS check, it was being used in F#.
Right.
I didn't realize that the FS check folks, team, community had come up with some extensions to make it not only usable in C#, but also automatically bind to like XUnit, which I think is pretty cool. I would definitely like to look into this a little bit more and come up with real use cases where it's like, hey, I have a model that represents these accounts in my homeowners association, and so I'm writing tests for it, and it turns out FS check helped me find a unit test case that I didn't even consider, but that I'd better code for, and that's not really that great here, but I was actually surprised at how easy it was to write some of this stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, it certainly is easy. It appears to be easier than other versions of things I've seen that do lists. And so I went on their website and I see what you're saying now. I didn't realize it's sort of random. So each time you run that test, it's going to run it on different data, I guess.
Yeah, right.
I made a note. I'm gonna certainly look into this because there's certainly a lot of cases where running one test is, well, we write like 3 of them, and I agree with you. Like it's great to have like some other random numbers in here or random input just to make sure that things are not failing under odd circumstances, right? And so it's a cool idea. I'm on board.
Yeah, I mean this is not an episode on it. It was just right. Like, hey, you talked about unit testing. I was kind of thinking like, hey, if we just want to just take a moment to look at some code, and that's it. There's nothing special. We'll probably come back to it. I think we'll probably come back to it at some point.
Thanks for showing us that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm real interested. And this goes along with my whole looking at my list of like, why am I interested in like I said, F#, and it's not even so much like, hey, maybe I can bring some inspiration back to work, right? Or to things people are doing. So
that's very cool. I'm looking at their website now. I'm like distracted. I'm checking out their website.
Yeah. We had some other great comments. Let me switch back to feature chat and look at them.
Something about open source.
A little while back, Beyond Here Lies Nothing said it would be fun for this community to create an open source project in 2022, and I believe it's fair to say that there was a lot of positive reaction to that. So I do think that's a great idea, and then then you start wondering what it is you want to take on.
Yeah, would have to be small.
I think it's interesting. We could all probably use more practice working in teams because it's just so like it seems so easy when you're the only person working on the code, but of course that's not realistic because you'll never get anything done working by yourself. It's just the world, it's too big, the problems that you're probably trying to solve. Unless it's a fun local thing, that's a different thing, but
so we could finally get that website done.
Open source.
Yeah, right. I could finally get. I actually have had an idea for a show for a while, where Dark Elder says contribute to open source, of finding using some of these sites like Up for Grabs. I think it's called upforgrabs.net. I'm going to go search for it now. And then I think there's another one about good first time issues, and I think they might be different sites. So there are some open source projects that commit to using a label like Up for Grabs or Good First Issue, and then there are sites that aggregate those. So what's neat about that is that you can theoretically, here we go. I don't know if you're still sharing.
I can bring it back up. Hang on.
But I've looked through here before, and I've said stuff like this. Well, what if these are all the different sites that have Up for Grabs issues? But so it really doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick something. In fact, why don't I just pick
Hey, look at that Entity Framework Core.
Entity Framework Core. They have a good first issue tag. And so I have actually done this where I've come in and I've said, okay,
You're gonna have to zoom in on this a bit, though. Hang on, because that's really hard to see.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
So let me see what comes up for good first issue, right? Maybe.
So the point is they're labeling. They have known issues. They can't get to them all, and they know some of these would be easy. And if you want to get involved, why don't you try this thing, right?
Yep. And I've actually, so this is an idea that I've had when I'm trying to think of show ideas, is what if we found something, said we'd solved it, and pushed the commit and tried to do as much of it as we could live without slowing down the project.
Mm-hmm.
But like, simplify calls to date nested in stir-f time. A lot of times, whoever the issue opener is might actually say, listen, sometimes they'll even say, look, I even kind of know where you need to go look. And I think that's what we're kind of getting here, maybe. And then you can jump in and say, like, I want to take a crack at this. And a lot of times they'll help you through it, which is really cool. So
this is cool.
Yeah. So I've done that. I've looked through Up for Grabs. I've looked through the .NET docs, or the .NET runtime itself, like how, and then I got into the case of like, okay, now I got to learn how to build the .NET runtime on my own, which I'm not really even sure what's involved, to be totally fair. I'm not trying to say that it's,
Right.
But there are a couple ASP.NET community stand-ups within the last year. One of them was about contributing to Blazor, and the other one was about contributing to ASP.NET. And I've kind of got those bookmarked, like, okay, they went through, here's what you should check out. Here's what you should build. Like, it's not getting any easier. So
I like this idea. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah,
totally. So maybe this is a New Year's resolution to complete one of these on our show or something like that.
Right.
If it goes well, I mean, I think we'd have to keep it to the C# stuff probably.
Yeah, it's neat that there's a lot of stuff in here, though. That's really cool. So, wow, the .NET Core Windows Forms team. Look at that. 85 Up for Grabs issues. Whoops, I didn't want tags. So,
but these don't say first time. They're just up for grabs, right?
So commonly a project will use either first time, help wanted, up for grabs. They don't necessarily always.
Okay.
But you could be right in what you're saying, is that some of these may not necessarily be the simplest. They might be, but
Wow.
So yeah, people are out there asking for help, right? And sometimes those people are using the projects that you are using. So it's interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you had anything else on your list, or. if we got through it, but that was sort of a. I didn't write it down. I didn't have it noted, but when Dark Elder said it, I said, "Oh, that's right. That's right. We could contribute to open source, or contribute to something, right? Just
yeah, it's a good idea, Dark Elder, right? Lots of good ideas in the chat today. I think all kinds of cool stuff. I think we had a really pretty active stream with a lot of people. Some names I hadn't seen before, and it was nice to you know, have people engage with us, and I hope people had fun and enjoy a show like this. We're just kind of hanging out, talking about stuff, and do we have any known upcoming shows, or are we winging it at this point for the next couple?
We know that we are not going to be here the 29th of December.
Oh, right. Sure.
And that
before the end of the year.
Okay. So we think the 8th and the 15th.
Yes.
On the 15th is also a Philly.net. So if you do hit the Philly.net meetup, the presenter we know, talking about GitHub Actions, Rich will be there, and then our plan is to see if we can lead out of that, and then maybe do some follow up. And it doesn't ever necessarily have to be follow up, but we can lead out of that. So we could talk
maybe
about that.
We'll do like an 8 o'clock start that night.
Yeah, we might do an 8 o'clock start, right? So, but next week I'm looking at the calendar and I don't see a specific topic. So that means that no, we don't necessarily have one. But it doesn't mean between now and then there won't be a little bit of code to look at, or we might come up with another thing to talk about. But I'm really glad that we did get a lot of neat participation from folks, especially just, isn't it neat that the community, the kind of developer community, like, we recognize that we're always learning. And then I think a lot of us also recognize that we're never going to learn everything, and that's okay. That's fine. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, we're having fun. Yes, cool. So, what else do we want to talk about? We got our YouTube channel. Don't forget, if you're new here, check us out at youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. You can look at our archives. You can look at some of our great guest appearance shows. We had Carl Franklin on the show. We've had a bunch of cool guests, really. You can check those shows out if you look for a topic. You might, if you like listening to the way we talk about stuff, you look through there and you'll find, oh, there's a cool topic. I'll learn something with these guys. We try to have a good time and learn some stuff along the way. We got a lot of shows on their YouTube channel now, huh? Wonder how many episodes we got. A lot.
It's grown, hasn't it? And isn't that, remember at the beginning, it was, someday there will be a backlog of of shows. And that's good. I think, like, to Rich's point, it might be helpful to have some short form content a little bit later, but for now it's perfectly fine. Because it's hard, I think, for some folks to commit to watching like a whole show. But there were 175 views on the GitHub Copilot, so that tells you that people were interested in seeing some folks use Copilot, for real.
Yeah, that was fun. That was definitely fun.
Yeah.
We might have to do the math. We're pretty close to 100 here.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I would think so. I thought we had more than that, honestly.
Now we're getting close. Looks like we have about almost 70 live streamed shows and about 23 that we manually uploaded. So, which
means we did them live, probably, but somehow they never got posted or something like that. That something didn't work out right.
Exactly. So,
because I don't think we've done a real show. Like, we've done a couple short, bits and things like that, but a couple of interviews. But have we ever done a show sort of taped in advance, like in the traditional format? I don't think we have, right?
We've not, no.
Yeah,
I think everything's been live, right? Yeah.
Well, we did some interviews at like code camps a couple times that we posted on our channel.
Yes.
Like things like that, but they weren't really like the Dev Talk Show. It's more like the Dev Talk Show presents an interview with such and such. You know. All right. Cool.
Yeah, fun stuff. All right. Well, hey, if you're watching us in the future on YouTube, what is your developer resolution for 2022? No matter what it is, leave a comment in the chat. And if you're available Wednesday nights and you want to join us, Wednesday nights 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We are here both on Twitch. The channel is The Dev Talk Show, or youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. We try to keep up with chat, and we do have our own meetup. If you go to meetup.com and type The Dev Talk Show, you will find it. Sometimes we get pretty good and get topics out a few weeks ahead, and we're trying to do that because we know it helps everyone to know what might be coming up. We're all busy, and if it's a show you're especially interested in, you might either want to catch it on YouTube later if you can't make it, or you might say, hey, I want to make sure I make that one. But we appreciate everybody who came in tonight and joined the chat. It's some first-time chats. Really appreciate it. And if you're here, we don't mind if you're here watching the show and not necessarily joining the chat. That's okay too. We're just glad you're here, whether you're watching us live or on YouTube. So once again, I think that's about it. So I would like to wish everybody, it is Hanukkah, and it's okay to say Happy Hanukkah each day of Hanukkah. Is that a fair?
You could say Happy Hanukkah to me in June, and I wouldn't be bothered by that. Yeah, anytime you want. Yeah.
So Happy Hanukkah to everyone out there, because we're right in the middle of the Festival of Lights, right? So
nicely done, Chris.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert, but because I'm not. But it is an important time. It's an important time for people. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next Wednesday. I didn't say, I want to make sure that I thank my co-hosts Andy Schwam and Rich Ross, and for them I'm Chris Gomez, and we will see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.